Are you addicted to romance like we are? Follow the journey of two soulmates in the sweet love story by Molly Summers. Erica shifted her weight from one hip to the other, hoping it would relieve the ache in her lower back. It didn't do much good, but she didn't have a lot of options. She was stuck on this bus until she reached her destination, which should be in about 10 minutes, if the announcement that had just been made over the intercom system was to be believed. It had been a long ride, almost 12 hours, and it felt like a victory to finally be so close to Castle Beach, the eclectic beach community that was going to be her new home. She'd only been to the place once, as a little girl on vacation with her family 25 years ago, and she knew it was probably a little crazy to move to a place that she was so unfamiliar with, but Erica needed a change. She was ready to shake things up, and what better way to do that than to quit her job, sell her house, and start a new business close to the beach. She wasn't running away from her problems. Nope. Not at all. As if to contradict her thoughts, Erica's back throbbed again, a reminder of the miserable twist her life had taken about 6 months ago. Even after weeks of physical therapy, she still felt the lingering effects of the injury she'd suffered during her car accident. It wasn't the only thing that stuck with her, but the rest of the damage was emotional. Shaking her head at herself, Erica pushed all of that baggage to the back of her mind and focused her attention out the bus window. They were rolling into town now, and she smiled as she got her first look at Castle Beach since she was 10 years old. It looked similar to how she remembered it, with palm trees lining the street. There were so many people on the sidewalks, some walking, others on bikes or electric scooters, and she made a game out of trying to pick out the tourists from the local residents. Tourists were easy to spot because they were usually taking pictures with their cell phones and they traveled in groups. As the bus reached downtown, Erica noticed that there was an artsy feeling to this area. There were vibrant colors painted on some of the buildings, bright blue, red, lime green, and yellow, and she spotted more than one art gallery. They passed one building, a cafe, that had a massive mural painted on the brick of one side depicting 3 surfers riding a wild wave. There were also gift shops all over the place, especially as they got closer to the beach. She looked eagerly toward the ocean, and it was even more gorgeous than she'd imagined, with the sun shining onto the white sand and a cloudless blue sky. The water was a darker shade, with endless waves that kept crashing up on the shore. When the bus finally stopped, Erica felt a surge of excitement. This was it. Her new beginning. Reaching beneath her seat, she grabbed her travel bag, which had everything she'd need for the next couple of days. She had things shipped from her apartment in Sturgis, Michigan to her new apartment here in Castle Beach, but she didn't want to be rushed into unpacking as soon as she arrived. The act of bending over so far stretched out her back, and she let out a sigh at the sweet relief of it. Then the bus started to slow down. They pulled into the station, and everyone filed off the Greyhound. Erica was the last to step off, looking at the GPS on her phone. Her new place was only 3 blocks away, and the bus had arrived right on schedule, so she should be on time to meet her new landlord if she started walking that way now. Besides, moving would help work out the stiffness in her back. Even though she had an appointment, she wasn't in a big hurry as she strolled down the sidewalk, passing restaurants and boutiques. She was on the main drag, which was a prime location for a business. There weren't many empty buildings here, so she knew she'd reached the right place when she came upon a building on the middle of the block that had an empty storefront. She peeked inside through the window. The lights were on, but she didn't see anyone inside. Trying the door, she found it to be unlocked. Pulling it open, she poked her head in first, not wanting to just waltz inside, even though she'd already paid the first month's rent. Erica had found the listing for the place online and contacted the landlord right away. It was impulsive, because she'd only tentatively been thinking about making the big move, but it felt like fate when she saw the location of the commercial space. She'd rented it sight unseen, hoping that the pictures online were accurate. Erica had found the listing for the place online and contacted the landlord right away. It was impulsive, because she'd only tentatively been thinking about making the big move, but it felt like fate when she saw the location of the commercial space. She'd rented it sight unseen, hoping that the pictures online were accurate. A quick look around satisfied her. The place was a blank slate, white walls with gray carpeting, and she could mold it into whatever she wanted. "Hello," she called out. There was a door at the back of the room that was cracked open, and she headed that way. To her immediate right was a narrow staircase leading to the second floor, where her apartment was located. That was another huge part of the appeal of the property. She wasn't just renting a place to run her business, she was going to live here too. Instead of going up the stairs, she kept going down the hallway. There was a small bathroom across from the stairs, just a toilet and a sink, and ahead she could see a back door. Beside it there was space framed out for a window, but no glass panes. Curiously, Erica walked forward and peeked out through the opening. The backyard was narrow with a tall oak tree providing shade and a small shed. There was another set of stairs by the back door, leading up to an elevated deck that would be a great place to entertain guests. Erica's eyes took all of this in quickly, but her focus was soon diverted by a man in the yard. Tall with short blonde hair and a beard, he had naturally tanned skin and an olive green t-shirt that clung to his sculpted upper body. She wasn't the type to openly stare at someone, but she couldn't seem to help herself as the man bent over to pick up a brand new window with the sticker still on it. He was a big man, with thick thighs and broad shoulders, exactly her type. The man turned around, his blue eyes widening at the sight of her. Erica couldn't even pretend she hadn't been watching him, and she was glad that she didn't usually blush easily, or else her face would probably be fire engine red. Hi," she blurted, her face stretching into a broad grin. "I'm Erica." Oh, he came closer and set the window down, leaning it against the outside of the building. Wiping his hands off on his dirty jeans, he held one of them out to her, a slightly crooked smile on his face. "Sorry, ma'am, I lost track of time." His accent was slight, but there was a definite southern quality to it, and it was pleasing to her ear. "Please, call me Erica," she said, shaking his hand. There were calluses on his palm and fingers, indicating that he did manual labor. "Erica," he repeated, and she felt the strangest flutter in her belly. "I'm Sebastian, your new landlord." "I figured. Thanks for fixing the window," she said, spotting the one he'd already removed lying in the grass. One of the panes had a spiderweb pattern of cracks right in the center. "Just doing my job, ma'am. I mean, Erica." He flashed that crooked grin again, and she had to blink to pull herself out of a daze. Sebastian was even better looking up close, with his prominent jaw and fine laugh lines around his eyes. "Not sure what happened to the window, but when I got here this morning to make sure everything was in order for you, I saw that it needed to be replaced." "So you're a man that takes action," Erica said, nodding. "I like that." Was she flirting? It had been so long since she'd even tried to date anyone, about 2 years, and she was very rusty. Even the excitingly playful conversation that was a part of meeting someone new was foreign to her. Still, there seemed to be something in the air between the two of them, a chemistry that was completely unexpected. "I aim to please," Sebastian said. That he did. But Erica wasn't looking for more than friendship from any man. She had been burned by love when her ex-boyfriend, Tyler, had cheated on her with her best friend. Not only was she betrayed by two of the most important people in her life at the time, but she'd actually walked in on the act since she and Tyler had been living together. Not only was she betrayed by two of the most important people in her life at the time, but she'd actually walked in on the act since she and Tyler had been living together. "Do you mind if I take a look upstairs?" she asked, and he nodded, fishing a set of keys out of his pocket. "Help yourself. I'm just going to finish up here." Erica took the keys from him and backtracked to the staircase. As she climbed the stairs, she could hear him working on the window, humming softly to himself the whole time. The sound was soothing, and she had the crazy thought that she could get used to it. When she reached the top of the stairs, there was a landing with a door. Easy enough. Entering the apartment, Erica got her first look at her new home. Wooden floors, beige walls, and stacks of boxes everywhere. Her stuff had been delivered yesterday, the furniture on one side of the living room while everything else filled the rest of the space. The wall directly across the room was exposed brick and had 3 large windows facing Main Street and letting in tons of natural light. The open floor plan was perfect, with a kitchen island facing the living room and cabinets that went all the way up to the ceiling. She weaved her way through the boxes and opened a door that led to the bedroom. There was more exposed brick on here, and an attached bathroom. It was a small apartment, but it fit her needs perfectly. "Erica?" Sebastian's voice came from the living room, and she walked back out to see him lingering just inside the door. "What do you think of the place?" "It's exactly what I need," she answered honestly. "What kind of business are you planning to open here, anyway?" "A party planning business. I used to work for a company in Michigan that planned weddings, birthday parties, and corporate events. Now I'm going to try to do it on my own." "That sounds great," Sebastian said. "I'm glad it's not another gift shop, to be honest. We have a lot of those around here." Erica chuckled, and Sebastian took a small step closer to her, as if he couldn't help himself. "I'll go ahead and leave you to get settled in," he continued. "Just let me know if you need anything." "Thanks," Erica said, walking over to the door with him. Sebastian walked out onto the landing, but turned around at the last minute, looking at her over his shoulder. Was she imagining the heated look in his eyes? "Welcome to Castle Beach," he said, then turned away again. She watched him walk away, nibbling on her lower lip. There was a part of her that wished he'd offered to show her around town or take her to dinner, something to show that he was interested in her as well, but she just stepped back into the apartment and shut the door, locking it. It was probably for the best that he didn't. No matter how attractive she might find Sebastian, she wasn't sure if she could ever completely trust a man again. The only thing she could offer Sebastian was friendship. Erica barely left her apartment for the first 2 days she was in Castle Beach. She was busy arranging her furniture, unpacking boxes, and, after calling Sebastian for permission, painting the walls. Neutral beige made sense for a rental property, but she wanted to make the place her own. So the bedroom was now painted a dark brown, a bold choice, but it worked with her white furniture and curtains. The pattern on her bedspread was pink and purple flowers, so it all balanced out the darkness of the walls. The living room was painted light blue, making the space look even larger, even with her big sectional couch and the bookshelf, where she lined up her books by subject. Most of them were romances, but she liked a good suspense novel and women's literature too. She'd ordered a pizza for dinner the first night she was here, and the leftovers had carried over to the next day, but she was sick of eating the same thing for lunch and dinner. Now that her apartment was finally in order, she contemplated whether she wanted to go to the grocery store or try out one of the many restaurants around her. Before she'd made a decision, there was a knock on the door leading out to her deck. Opening it, Erica was surprised to see a woman she didn't know standing there. She was taller than Erica, but most people were, since she was barely more than 5 feet tall and rail thin. Her blonde hair was pulled up in a top knot on her head, and when she smiled, it was so big that Erica felt like she could see all of her teeth. "Hi, there. You must be Erica Osborne." "Yes," Erica confirmed, looking at the stranger questioningly. She noticed that the woman was carrying a covered casserole dish in one hand and a huge basket full of baked goods in the other. She'd somehow managed to carry all that up the stairs. "How do you know my name?" "Oh, honey, all the locals know about you. Snatching up this place the day it went up for rent? Starting a party planning business? Cute as a button and seemingly single? You're the talk of Castle Beach." Erica wasn't sure how to feel about all that. She hadn't planned to become a hot topic of discussion and speculation in town, but there wasn't much she could do about it now. "How did you know I'm starting a party planning business? Did Sebastian tell you?" The woman's brown eyes widened. "Sebastian Bishop? Have you been getting friendly with your landlord?" No, that's not. I mean," Erica spluttered, feeling flustered. The blonde woman let out a loud laugh. "Oh, bless your heart. You're shy. Don't worry, you'll loosen up as we get to know each other. I'm Natalie Giles, by the way." "Please, come in," Erica replied, belatedly remembering her manners and stepping aside to allow the woman to enter the apartment. Natalie stepped into the kitchen, pausing for only a second to take a look around. Then she sat down the basket and the casserole dish on the kitchen island. "Are you the welcoming committee?" Erica asked as she closed the door. "That's exactly what I am," Natalie confirmed. "From the Church of the Risen Cavalry." "You guys have an actual committee?" "Yap. We all got together and put in sweets for the gift basket, but I know how hectic things can be when moving into a new place, so I made you dinner." "You read my mind," Erica said, lifting the foil to peek underneath. "It's nothing fancy, just a tater tot casserole. Comfort food. Smells great." Erica felt a warmth in her heart as she looked at what Natalie had brought her. "You hungry?" "Definitely." Erica was happy to have her first opportunity to entertain, and it was even better that she didn't have to cook. They sat at her kitchen island, one on each side, drinking lemonade and eating the casserole. Erica had never had a tater tot casserole before, but she liked it. Cheese, potato, meat. What was there not to like? Natalie talked almost non-stop while they ate, filling Erica in on all the gossip about people in town that she hadn't even met yet. It was entertaining, listening to everything happening in the community. It reminded her of a soap opera. Erica confirmed that she was starting a party planning business, skillfully avoiding the subject when Natalie asked about why she'd moved to Castle Beach. She wasn't ready to talk about it yet. But the two women hit it off, and by the time they'd each finished their portions of the casserole and eaten dessert from the basket that Natalie brought, a cheese Danish for her and a chocolate chip cookie for Erica, they were chatting like old friends and had even exchanged phone numbers. "You should consider joining our book club," Natalie said, excitement lighting up her eyes. "I couldn't help noticing your bookshelf, and I think you'll fit right in. You already have the book we just started reading. To Kill a Mockingbird. Camila picked it." "Camila? She's a college professor at Pembroke College in the next town over. There are 4 of us in the club, and we take turns picking the books we read." Natalie stood, wiping her mouth with a napkin. "I'd better go, but if you're interested, I'll text you the address of where we're meeting next time. We try to get together once a week." "That sounds great," Erica said, walking her new friend to the door. She'd already read the book, so why not? "Perfect. I'll see you next week." Natalie left, and Erica leaned against the door, smiling. It had been hard to leave all her friends behind when she moved here, and she'd been nervous about trying to make new ones. That seemed like something that was harder to do as she got older. Now she had hope. Crossing to the kitchen sink, Erica was about to start the water running to rinse off the dinner dishes and put them in the dishwasher, but when she got there, she saw that the faucet was leaking. After making sure the hot and cold water were both turned off, she let out a little sigh and picked up her phone. Hopefully, Sebastian had meant it when he said to let him know if she needed anything. The next day, Sebastian parked his truck in front of the building he was renting to Erica and grabbed his toolbox out of the passenger seat. When she called yesterday, he'd been out at a property he owned in a more residential part of town, trimming a tree that had overgrown at a house he'd been renting to a sweet old lady named Mary for nearly 10 years. It was one of the first houses he'd bought when he got into the property management business, and she had always paid her rent on time, from the very beginning. Not that he would have neglected the property if she hadn't, it just endeared her to him a little more. Sebastian understood the importance of taking care of the properties he owned. They were an investment in his future, his livelihood. He'd been told in the past that he was a good landlord, and he appreciated that, but it all came down to being responsible. He'd always been good at that. Walking to the door of the shop, he pulled it open and saw that Erica was already making great strides in getting the place transformed into a new business. She had painted the walls a soft pink color, which wasn't something he would have picked personally, but he wasn't much of a party planner either. There was a sitting area set up, with couches and a low coffee table, which had brochures and a 3-ring binder that said wedding pictures on the front in bold letters. There was music coming from a small Bluetooth speaker on the coffee table, and he recognized it as one of his brother's favorite bands, Journey. Erica was working at a round table with 4 chairs surrounding it, putting together a display with a centerpiece made of fresh flowers, a white tablecloth, and satin chair covers. He watched for a moment as she moved gracefully around the table, placing fine china in front of each seat. There was something mesmerizing about this woman, and he couldn't look away. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, which swayed as she moved, occasionally shaking her hips to the beat of the music. She was lost in her own world and hadn't noticed him yet. He waited until she placed the last dish down to approach and tap her on the shoulder. As he expected, she jumped and whirled around. That was why he'd waited. He didn't want to be responsible for making her drop anything so breakable. Sebastian tried not to read too much into the big smile that broke out across her face, but it still made a warm feeling bloom in the center of his chest. He'd almost forgotten how captivating her hazel eyes were. With hints of green and a core of gold, he felt like he could look at them every day and still get lost. Reminding himself that he barely knew this woman, he dismissed that thought. "Didn't mean to scare you," he told her, speaking loudly to be heard over the music. Erica pulled her cell phone out of her pocket, tapping the screen and cutting off the music. "Sorry, I didn't hear you come in." "The place is looking nice," he said, glancing around the room. "It's a work in progress, but I can't wait to get it opened up." "How did you get into this business?" he asked curiously. He'd never known anyone that did this for a living before. "Well, it all started about 12 years ago when my parents celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. I was like any typical girl in her early 20s, not sure what to do with my life. I was working at a gas station at the time. But I helped them plan the party, and it went so well that a friend of the family asked me to help her plan her son's birthday party. Well, it all started about 12 years ago when my parents celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. I was like any typical girl in her early 20s, not sure what to do with my life. I was working at a gas station at the time, but I helped them plan the party, and it went so well that a friend of the family asked me to help her plan her son's birthday party. From there, I just sort of became the person that my friends and family would go to for help with parties and events. Eventually, I ended up with a job offer from a local company, and I worked there until I decided to move here." "Wow. You must be good at what you do." Erica shrugged but gave him a shy smile. "I like to think so." "Well, let me get your sink fixed up, and you can get back to doing your thing." Erica led him up the stairs. He could have gone himself, but he was glad that she accompanied him. He might have owned the property, but it was her home now. He tried not to go into his occupied properties without the tenant if he could avoid it. But also, Erica was good company. She sat on a stool at the kitchen island while he worked on the faucet. It was an easy fix, and didn't necessarily require his full attention, so they could continue to get to know each other. "So why'd you choose to move to Castle Beach?" he asked. He had lived here his entire life, and there were plenty of tourists that came and went, but the population of the town wasn't huge. It was a small community, and he always wondered what drew new people to call this town home. "I was here once, when I was a little girl, and I always remembered how enchanted I was by the ocean and the town." Sebastian wasn't looking at her, but he imagined that she had a wistful expression. "I don't know, I guess that I just always wanted to come back, and I wanted to move to a place where it doesn't snow." "Not a fan of snow, huh?" he asked. There was a brief pause. "No, I'm not." Sebastian did glance at her now, picking up on something heavy in her voice. Her stare was trained on the top of the island as she picked at her fingernails. "You okay?" Erica's eyes lifted to his, and he could see the troubled look there for just a second, but she hid it from him by breaking eye contact. "Yeah." She cleared her throat. "You know what else? I've always remembered how fascinated I was by a starfish I saw on the beach back then. It's the reason that I've decided to name my business Starfish Events." Sebastian could tell she was trying to change the subject, but he wasn't going to push her to talk about what was really on her mind. You know, my sister just got engaged last week. Maybe I'll send her your way for some help planning, he said, and she seemed to legitimately brighten at that. You have a sister? And 4 brothers, he said, straightening from the sink. Erica's eyes widened. 6 kids? Sebastian chuckled. Crouching down, he turned the water back on at the valve under the sink. No leak. And I'm the oldest, he said. Not gonna lie, it was a bit of a madhouse. I'll bet. I can't imagine. I'm an only child. You know, despite how big and crazy our family get-togethers can be, I wouldn't change it for the world. My siblings mean the world to me. We're all really close. He opened his toolbox and started packing up his tools and equipment. What's that? Erica asked, pointing to the block of wood he'd been carving on in his free time. I'm hoping it'll end up looking like an owl when I'm done with it. Erica furrowed her brow and tilted her head. I like to whittle. I'm not a great artist or anything, but I enjoy having something to do with my hands. That's awesome. I've never known anyone that whittled. You'll have to make me something sometime. Her tone was light, not really demanding anything from him, but Sebastian promised himself that he would make her something. He liked Erica. She was easy to talk to. I guess I better head out, he said, picking up his toolbox. I forgot to tell you the other day, there's a parking spot in the alley where there's gravel behind the tree. Just in case you don't want to park out on Main Street. I don't own a car. Again, he sensed something serious hiding in her voice. She was holding something back from him, and for some reason, he really wanted to know what it was. He wanted to know everything about Erica because the more he learned, the more he felt for her. It was fast, but he couldn't help thinking that this might be the woman for him. Sebastian's heart jumped into his throat as he was driving down Main Street 2 days later. Erica was perched on the top of a ladder, holding up a large wooden sign with the name of her party planning business while tourists weaved around her on the sidewalk. As he was pulling over, she wobbled, almost losing her grip on the sign and tumbling onto the concrete below. Putting the truck in park, he didn't even pause long enough to kill the engine before hopping out and hurrying to her. What in the world are you doing? He asked and regretted it as she craned her neck to look down at him. The last thing she needed right now was a distraction. My new sign came in today, she exclaimed happily. Yeah, that's great. Come on down now. I need to get this hung up, and I'm not paying the company to do it. Do you have any idea what they charge? Don't you remember when I told you to let me know if you need anything? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I thought you were talking about issues with the property. I was talking about anything. Starting a business is tough, and if you need help, I'm your man. He realized that he meant those words. She didn't know it yet, but he was hers. So come down and let me do that for you, he insisted, holding up his arms to take the sign from her. It was surprisingly heavy, and he could hardly believe that she'd been holding it up by herself. Sebastian put the sign down and held out his hand as she made her way down the ladder. When she took it, he felt a tingle shoot up his arm. Her most innocent touches were electrifying. Once her feet were safely on the ground, Sebastian repositioned the ladder closer to the building and climbed up to the top with the sign tucked under one arm. Erica held the ladder for him and handed him the drill once he had the sign in place where she wanted it. He didn't have a level with him, so he lined the bottom edge of the sign up with the vinyl siding. When he was done, he stepped as far back as the wide sidewalk allowed to make sure it looked straight. Isn't it fantastic? Erica asked, practically glowing with happiness. It makes everything feel so official. Sebastian couldn't help smiling. It was like her happiness was contagious. Or maybe he just liked seeing her like this. Thanks so much for your help. You know what? I want to thank you. Join me for dinner. I was about to throw some burgers on the grill. Oh, you don't have to. I want to, she insisted. Please. Sebastian had the strangest feeling that this woman would be nearly impossible to say no to. Sure, that sounds great. He grabbed the ladder, folding it up. "I'll meet you upstairs after I get this put away." Taking the ladder and drilled to the shed around back, he put it away. By the time he walked up the back steps, Erica had come out onto the deck and fired up the grill. There was wicker patio furniture set up and a citronella candle in the center of a glass-topped table. "Please take a seat," she said, gesturing to the chairs as she put some burgers on the grill. "You've really made this place your own. You settling in okay?" "Yes, it's starting to feel like home. Now I just have to get the downstairs ready for my grand opening." "Well, I hope you're ready for a lot of business," he said, "because everyone's going to want to check this place out." "Yeah, I hear I'm already the talk of the town. A woman from the welcoming committee came by a couple days ago." "Natalie?" he guessed. "Yeah, how did you know?" she asked, taking a seat at the table across from him. "She always volunteers to drop off the welcome baskets. Don't tell her I said this, but I think she likes to be the first person to get the scoop on the newcomers." She did seem like a bit of a gossip, Erica said, but he didn't detect any judgment in her voice. "Nat always has been," he said fondly. Erica looked at him curiously and, for just a second, he could have sworn he saw jealousy flash deep within her eyes, but he blinked and it was gone. He'd probably just imagined it. "I went to school with her. Her husband too." "Oh, I didn't realize she was married. I didn't notice a wedding ring on her finger. She's a soldier's widow. Been about 10 years now. Nat has raised their 15-year-old daughter pretty much alone." Sebastian wasn't one to gossip himself, but he didn't consider this story to fall under that category. Everyone knew about the tragic loss and Natalie's perseverance. Erica's eyes widened, and she brought a hand to her chest. "Oh, no. I had no idea. I'll make sure not to bring it up during book club." "Ah, the book club. You've been invited?" "Yeah, you've heard of it?" "Of course. The book club is an institution around here. Those ladies have been getting together and reading books for years. You know, this spring, they put together a fundraiser to save the elementary after-school reading program." "Very noble," Erica commented. "Do you happen to know if the bus route goes out to Natalie's house?" "That's where we're supposed to meet." "I'm not sure about that," Sebastian admitted. "But I have to ask, why don't you drive?" Erica got up out of her seat, lifting the lid of the grill and flipping the burgers. Sebastian watched her, waiting. He had a feeling that she was taking her time with tending to the burgers, probably to avoid answering his question. He wouldn't push it if she told him to back off, but he knew that sometimes people needed to talk about their problems, and he'd be happy to listen. Returning to her seat, she kept her eyes down, looking at her fingers as she twisted them together anxiously. "Listen, Erica, I didn't mean to pry dash." "No," she interrupted, her eyes finally meeting his own once again. "It's okay. I just haven't talked about it much." Sebastian reached out and placed a hand on top of her fingers, stilling them. "Whatever it is, talking might help." She gave him a small, slightly sad smile. It was 6 months ago, and in Michigan there was snow on the ground. A couple inches of it. But the roads had been plowed, so I thought. She swallowed hard, and he gave her fingers a squeeze. "I've been driving on icy roads every winter since I turned 16, and I've never had a problem, but this time was different. I was coming up to a stoplight, and I tried to stop, I really did, but my car just didn't. Instead, it slid straight into the intersection, right into the side of another car." Sebastian winced. "That sounds bad." "It was horrible. I hurt my back pretty bad, and it still acts up most days, but the worst part was the woman in the other car." Tears swam in Erica's eyes, and his stomach knotted into a fist. He really didn't like to see her so upset. Vanessa Bryant is her name. A 22-year-old grad student. She was paralyzed in the accident. Erica suddenly got up again, pulling her hand out from under his. She ducked her head so that he couldn't see her face, and returned to the grill, taking the burgers off and putting them on a platter. This time Sebastian followed her. She turned off the burners on the grill and turned around, jolting when she saw him right behind her. The air between them felt thick with tension, and he put his hands on her shoulders. "Hey, you know the accident wasn't your fault, right? Then why do I feel so guilty?" Sebastian shrugged. "Human nature. But it's still not your fault." Erica shook her head. "I wish I could believe that so easily. I can't even bring myself to drive a car again. How about I help you with that?" "I don't know. I've tried to work up the courage, but the idea of getting back behind the wheel is just too nerve-wracking." "You know what you need? A stress-free situation, one where you couldn't possibly crash into anything or anyone. I own a plot of land on the north end of town, just flat grass. How about I take you there? You can try driving my truck, see how you feel." "You'd do that for me?" "Of course." Sebastian wasn't sure why, but he felt a connection to this woman. He'd do whatever he could to help her. "Thanks," she said. "I'm glad I found a friend like you." "Me too. Now, how about we eat dinner before those burgers get cold?" "Let's do it." Erica went into the apartment to get some buns and drinks, so Sebastian sat back down to wait for her. He didn't tell her, but he hoped that one day she'd come to think of him as more than a friend. Days later, Erica was sitting behind the wheel of Sebastian's truck, her hands shaky as she put the key in the ignition. She tried to tell herself that she was fine. It had been 19 years since she got her driver's license, and she'd driven thousands of times. So why couldn't she get past the one time it had gone wrong? Her heart was racing, and her grip on the steering wheel was so tight her knuckles were white. She knew the next steps in this process: foot on the brake, put the truck in drive, and accelerate. It was simple. Just as Sebastian said, there was no one here to collide with. But in her mind, she was reliving the last time she was behind the wheel. Her chest felt tight as the panic that she'd felt that day resurfaced. She'd seen herself sliding toward the car and kept mashing on the brake. It did no good, and the helplessness combined with the fear just before she hit the young girl. She'd never really let go of those emotions, she realized. "Take your time," Sebastian said from beside her. Erica glanced over and saw the patient look in his eyes. He was completely relaxed in his seat, with his elbow hanging out the open window. "Don't rush yourself." Erica let out a humorless laugh. "I feel so silly, freaking out like this." "Don't be so hard on yourself. You've been through a trauma." There was something calming about Sebastian's voice, and she let that feeling wash over her. Taking a deep breath, she tried to stifle her panic. "I can do this." Trying to cling to that belief, she made herself put the truck in gear. For a moment, she thought that she was going to be okay, but then the truck started to roll forward. Her throat constricted as a cold terror shot through her. They'd only moved forward a couple of feet when she slammed on the brakes, sending both of their bodies forward until the seatbelts tightened. "Whoa." Sebastian braced himself with a hand on the dashboard. "You okay?" No, she wasn't. She put the truck in park, feeling mortified. Covering her face with her hands, Erica struggled to catch her breath, but with each pull of air into her lungs, she felt more and more like she was suffocating. Her blood rushed in her ears, and she couldn't believe this was happening in front of Sebastian. Her mind was a jumble of incoherent thoughts, and she struggled to sort them out. The click of Sebastian unbuckling his seatbelt was followed by a pair of strong arms wrapping around her. Erica raised her head and saw that his brow was drawn down as he looked at her with concern. Taking a hold of her hand, he placed it on his own chest as he took deep breaths in and out. "Mimic my breathing. Just focus on that. In and out. You can do it." She listened to his words, feeling a warm affection blooming in her chest. There was no room in her heart for worry about her trust issues right now. All she could focus on was her breathing. She closed her eyes and everything fell away other than her and Sebastian. It took several long minutes, during which he held her and provided a solid comfort that she needed so desperately, but eventually her breathing evened out, matching his own. When she opened her eyes again, he was still watching her. Feeling bold, she tilted her head and parted her lips. A second later, Sebastian swooped in and pressed his mouth to hers. There was an explosion of sensation at the contact, and Erica melted into his embrace. She forgot about her embarrassment and disappointment at her own reaction to driving for a moment. There was only him. Her confidence soared, and she felt like she could accomplish anything. The kiss was magic. Sebastian was amazed at the depth of his feelings for Erica and the way that having her in his arms felt so right. Her lips molded to his, and he could still feel her palm flat against his chest. The warmth of her touch radiated through his shirt. When they pulled away, she was breathing heavily again, but not from panic this time. She looked at him with eyes that were a shade darker, and lips slightly red from his kiss. "Wow," she said softly, "you took the word right out of my mouth." Sebastian released her, and she sat back in her seat. He watched as she looked at the steering wheel, seemingly deep in thought. He'd expected her to give up after her last attempt to drive. The terror in her eyes had been intense, and he didn't think she'd want to go through that again. But when she glanced over at him again, there was a steely determination in her eyes. "I'm going to do this," she said confidently, and he couldn't tell if she was talking to him or herself. It didn't really matter, he decided, settling back into his seat and buckling up again. This time, Erica paused to take a few deep breaths before she put the truck in gear. She tensed up as she eased off the brake and the truck started to move, but she didn't slam on the brakes this time. They moved agonizingly slowly at first, but this time, she was able to handle it. She drove halfway across the plot of land, just going in a straight line, but it was a heck of an accomplishment considering how stressed she was at the prospect of driving at all. "You did a great job," he told her, and Erica turned, squealing as she threw her arms around his neck. "I can't believe I did it." Sebastian patted her back. He liked how excited she got about things like her new sign or driving his truck. Her happiness made him feel lighter somehow. As she went back to driving, he decided that this was the perfect way to spend an afternoon. The day after she drove Sebastian's truck, it was time to open her new business. Erica had set up the place like a showroom, with displays showcasing party decor, a wedding reception seating arrangement, and a large photo collage displaying some of her past work. She had spent some time over the last week forming relationships with caterers, bands, and cleaning services. Anyone that provided a party-related service in Castle Beach or the surrounding area was now a contact of hers, and she had a large round table with brochures and business cards. One of the caterers provided some snacks for her grand opening: marinated goat cheese, spinach and feta filo pockets, and small antipasto skewers. People kept filtering in and out, checking out the new business, talking to Erica and snacking on the food. The place looked good, and she was proud as she looked around. It had taken most of her savings to get the business started, and a lot of that was spent buying party supplies that she kept in a storage unit, but it was going to pay off. Today was her first day of business, and she'd already signed up a client before noon. It was a wedding, her favorite event to plan. Her emotions were running high as she met so many people, keeping a smile on her face and giving the same rundown of her party planning services over and over. In the early afternoon, she finally experienced a bit of a lull in foot traffic. That was when Sebastian showed up. Erica hadn't seen him since he'd dropped her off the day before, and their goodbye was awkward. They'd kissed and, while it was amazing, Erica had started to regret it during the drive back to her place. Sebastian was a good man, and she was attracted to him, but she had a hard time letting go of the past, whether it was moving past the trauma of her car accident or trusting a man again after the betrayal she dealt with in her last relationship. Now, when Sebastian met her eyes from across the room and a heart-stopping smile spread across his face, she felt a muted version of the fear that had made her panic yesterday, as if she was on the verge of doing something dangerous, like falling for the man. She hadn't planned this, and the instinct to protect her heart grew stronger as Sebastian got closer. "Looks like business is going well," he said, stopping beside her. Erica was leaning forward, straightening the flowers in the centerpiece of her wedding table display. A strand of hair had fallen into her face, and when she turned to look at Sebastian, he reached out to tuck it behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, and the action felt too intimate. She reacted without thinking, her inner turmoil about her feelings for the man affecting her judgment as she straightened and took a step back, out of his reach. The look of hurt confusion in Sebastian's eyes made her stomach drop. He dropped his hand to his side as he understood that she was rejecting his touch. It was uncomfortable, and she hated that. Ever since she'd met him, things between them had been so easy, and she didn't want to lose that. Erica opened her mouth to say something, maybe to explain that she had a rough romantic history, maybe to tell him that she really liked him. She wasn't sure how to explain this moment of wavering, but before she figured it out, the bell above the entrance to the shop rang as 2 more customers walked inside. Erica's eyes left his as she glanced at the newcomers, and he took that opportunity to slip away from her, heading right back toward the door where he'd just entered. As he walked by the women that had just arrived, they both greeted him warmly, but Sebastian didn't stay and talk to them. Instead, he excused himself, glancing back at Erica on his way out the door. She felt the strangest sense of loss as he walked away, and she thought about yesterday. The tender understanding that he showed when she had been in the grip of her panic attack had touched her heart. Why couldn't she get over her last heartbreak and let Sebastian in? She wanted to, but she couldn't seem to let it go. She sighed and stepped away from the table, but when she glanced down to make sure the tablecloth wasn't wrinkled, her eye caught on something that hadn't been there before. A small piece of wood was lying there. Picking it up, she felt a lump in her throat as she realized that it was a starfish. Sebastian had whittled it for her. She thought about last week, when he'd fixed her sink. She'd lightly suggested that he whittle something for her. He'd done it. Of course he had. In the short time that she'd known Sebastian, hadn't he proven that he was the kind of man that she could count on? What the heck am I doing? A sense of urgency took over, and Erica started to make her way toward the door, hoping that he hadn't left yet. "I'll be right with you," she told the customers that were walking around, looking the place over. She didn't wait around to hear their responses. Instead, she hurried outside, hoping that this time she could find the right words. Sebastian had whittled it for her. She thought about last week, when he'd fixed her sink. She'd lightly suggested that he whittle something for her. He'd done it. Of course he had. In the short time that she'd known Sebastian, hadn't he proven that he was the kind of man that she could count on? What the heck am I doing? A sense of urgency took over, and Erica started to make her way toward the door, hoping that he hadn't left yet. "I'll be right with you," she told the customers that were walking around, looking the place over. She didn't wait around to hear their responses. Instead, she hurried outside, hoping that this time she could find the right words. Sebastian didn't know what had changed between the two of them in one day, but something was different. He could see the hesitation in her eyes. She had talked herself out of whatever was growing between them. He just knew it. He didn't know why, if he'd moved too fast with the kiss, but it was clear that something had happened. Crossing the street, he headed back toward his truck. He sighed, brushing his hair back off his face. He had quit smoking 5 years ago, but as he thought about the way that Erica had stepped away from him inside, he really wanted to light one up. Man, he felt like an idiot. He'd assumed after their kiss yesterday that things were going to progress between them, but she hadn't promised him anything of the sort. He had just reached his truck when he heard a familiar voice call out from behind him. "Sebastian, wait." When he turned around, it was a shock to see Erica jogging toward him, pausing for only a few seconds to check that the street was clear before hurrying forward. He didn't know what to make of the wide grin on her face. "I'm sorry I freaked out in there," she blurted out when she reached him. "It's all about my own hang-ups. I didn't mean to hurt you." "What are you saying?" "I love this." She held out the starfish he'd whittled for her. It was the size of her palm, and he smiled at her words. "I'm glad. I've been working on it in my free time for the last couple of days, and I wanted to give it to you today, to congratulate you on opening your business. You really are a good man, aren't you?" "I try," he grinned. "That's why I had to follow you out here. I couldn't let you leave without doing this." Erica wrapped her hands around his neck, pulling him close and pressing a kiss to his lips. He stepped closer until their bodies were flush against each other. They were in public, where anyone could see, but he didn't care. His blood was on fire, and whatever had happened before, the reason she had pulled away from him didn't matter. She was here now, in his arms, and they could work out any issues later. All he knew was that Erica was his girl, and he would do whatever it took to remind her of that from now on. When they pulled away, she looked up at him, and there was no conflict in her eyes now. "Have dinner with me tomorrow night," he said, putting himself out there once again. This time, he was sure that she wouldn't rebuff him. Then she grimaced. "I can't. I have book club. After. I don't care how late it is." Erica's eyes softened. "It's a date." Unable to help himself, Sebastian pulled her in for another kiss. He couldn't get enough of this woman. "Welcome," Natalie said, holding open the door of her spacious apartment. Erica walked inside, clinging to her book in one hand and Natalie's empty casserole dish in the other. She found herself standing in a living room with white leather furniture and a brick fireplace. There were 3 other women there already, spread out on the chairs and oversized couch. "Red or white wine?" Natalie asked as she led Erica further into the room. Red," Erica responded, handing over the casserole dish and accepting the glass of wine that Natalie produced. "Please, take a seat," a woman sitting in a chair by the fireplace said. She had short blonde hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "I'm Camila. Nice to meet you," Erica said, sitting on the couch beside a woman with chestnut brown hair. She was wearing expensive-looking jewelry that glimmered in the natural light coming in from the open windows. "I'm Jasmine," she introduced herself, "and that's Penelope." A redhead sitting on the other side of Jasmine leaned forward to see Erica and gave her a wave. She looked younger than the others, and Erica wondered how they all knew each other. "Oh, good, you're all getting acquainted." Natalie smiled as she walked back in from the kitchen. She put the casserole dish away and was carrying a tray of cucumber sandwiches, which she set on the coffee table. "Well, we've introduced ourselves at least," Camila said. She turned back to Erica. "I'm a professor at the community college, teaching art history." Erica thought she looked like a professor. She also had the air of someone that was used to commanding attention. They fell into easy conversation after that, and Erica learned that Penelope was indeed the youngest of the group at 30 years old. She was a chef at a local seafood restaurant and a sweet woman. There was an almost innocent quality to her that endeared her to Erica right away. Jasmine was almost the opposite in personality, being more worldly and outspoken. It turned out that her jewelry was probably just as expensive as it looked. Since the woman was wealthy, she didn't go into much detail about it, but Erica didn't get the impression that the woman was shy in any way, including about her finances. They talked and ate, with time flying by, and Erica found herself relaxing. These women were all unique and intelligent, with the ability to debate themes and topics in their book without everything dissolving into an argument. She had the feeling that something significant was slipping into place here as they polished off the sandwiches and sipped their second glasses of wine. They had moved on from the topic of To Kill a Mockingbird and were discussing town gossip and their own personal lives. Erica thought that she might have just found friends that she would stay close with for the rest of her life. They just clicked. Just like her and Sebastian. That thought had her glancing at the wrought iron clock mounted on the wall above the fireplace and cringing. It was almost 8 o'clock. She hadn't meant to keep Sebastian waiting for so long, but who would have guessed that a book club meeting would go on for 3 hours? "I'm sorry, I have to go," she said, getting to her feet and stretching. She'd been sitting in one place for a long time, and her back was aching. She'd have to be more careful about that from now on. It was something that she'd have to live with, an unpleasant reminder of her accident. But with Sebastian's support, she was sure that she would be able to get fully past her guilt and fear someday. "And where are you off to in such a hurry?" Penelope asked curiously. "Actually, I have a date," she admitted, not sure if Sebastian would be comfortable being discussed here. He knew Natalie though, and he'd admitted that she liked to gossip, so he probably expected it. "Oh, you must be talking about Sebastian," Natalie said with a wicked grin. "Rumor has it that you two are now an item and prone to public displays of affection." Natalie winked and Erica bit her lip, looking down. "Now look what you've done," Camila chimed in, admonishing Natalie. "You've gone and embarrassed the poor woman." "Don't be embarrassed, dear," Jasmine said, placing a comforting hand on Erica's arm. "If I were dating a hunk like that, I'd lay claim to him in the middle of the street too." Erica groaned and rubbed her eyes. "I guess I did do that, didn't I?" "It's the talk of the town," Natalie told her. "But don't worry, it'll blow over quickly." In a place like Castle Beach, it's hard to keep secrets, but there's always a new hot topic for the beauty shop ladies to talk about after a couple of days. Is that where you get all your information about the goings-on around here? Penelope asked. At the beauty shop? I'll never tell, Natalie grinned, and Jasmine chuckled. You clucking hens are keeping Erica from her date, Camila pointed out, and all eyes returned to Erica. Natalie stood. Well, get on out of here. She made a shooing motion with her hands. Go get your man. You can tell us all about it next week. Nat, Camila said sternly. Or not, Natalie added with a shrug. Either way, you're coming back, right? Yeah, Erica nodded. I am. Erica's steps felt lighter as she left the apartment, and she realized that her new beginning was working out great. She had a new business that was already thriving, a man that was more understanding and sweet than she ever could have hoped for, and a group of women that were sure to bring laughter and support to her from now on. Not only was her new life starting out great, but her future looked bright.
Indulge in a timeless tale of love and new beginnings with this free romance. Book by Molly Summers. Get your copy free at romancereader.com/prequel.